You've probably heard the names of the third generation of gods: Zeus, Poseidon, Hades. But few people know that before Zeus, the ruler of Olympus, there was an era of his father, Cronus. Saturn, or Cronus, as the Greeks called him, was one of the most ancient and powerful deities of the ancient world. Born from the first primordial gods and father to most of the Olympians, he remains a fascinating figure in art, inspiring countless painters to depict him in their works. Today, I will tell you about two paintings based on ancient Greek myths, works that send chills down your spine. Saturn, the ancient supreme deity, was once foretold that one of his children, born from the goddess Rhea, his sister and wife, would overthrow him. Shaken by this prophecy, Saturn decided to prevent fate from being fulfilled. He committed a monstrous act. Every time Rhea gave birth, he swallowed the newborn whole, alive, imprisoning his own offspring within himself. Thus disappeared Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, the future gods of Olympus. Rhea, tormented by grief, could no longer endure such cruelty. When the time came to give birth to her youngest son, she devised a trick. Zeus, the future god of thunder and ruler of the sky, was born. To save him, Rhea secretly took the baby to the island of Crete and hid him in a cave, entrusting him to the care of nymphs and the divine goat Amalthea. Instead of the child, she presented Saturn with a stone wrapped in swaddling cloth. Suspecting nothing, Saturn swallowed the stone, believing he had rid himself of the threat. Years passed. Zeus grew strong and learned the truth about his birth. He swore to free his siblings and avenge his mother. With the help of the goddess Metis, he brewed a potion that would make Saturn vomit up everything he had swallowed. Disguised as a cupbearer, Zeus mixed the potion into Saturn's drink. Tormented by agony, Saturn regurgitated first the stone, and then all his children, alive and unharmed. Thus began the great war between Saturn and his offspring, the Titanomachy, the war of the gods. The world trembled under its power. At the head of the Titans stood Saturn and his allies, while Zeus led the new generation of gods, the Olympians. To gain the upper hand, Zeus freed the Cyclopes and the hundred-handed giants from Tartarus, ancient beings once imprisoned by Saturn himself. In gratitude, the Cyclopes forged for Zeus his greatest weapon, the thunderbolts. The battle raged for 10 years. In the end, Zeus's lightning illuminated the heavens, and the army of Titans was defeated. Saturn fell, and Zeus cast him into the abyss of Tartarus, establishing a new order, the rule of the Olympian gods. Since then, Saturn has come to symbolize time, which devours everything that is born. Saturn devouring his son is a mural painted by Francisco Goya between 1819 and 1823. It belongs to the series known as the Black Paintings, created directly on the walls of his home, the so-called House of the Deaf Man, near the river Manzanares, outside Madrid, where Goya moved seeking peace. At that time, he was 73 years old, and his life had taken a dark turn. Severe illness and deafness, the death of his wife and children, and a scandal surrounding his affair with the young married woman Leocadia Weiss. These events, combined with Spain's political instability and the artist's depression, left deep scars on his psyche. The house itself had once belonged to another deaf man, hence the name. During this period of isolation, Goya created about 80 drawings, grim visions of ghosts, witches, and other phantoms, expressions of his haunted imagination. He never titled these murals himself. The names we know today, Pinturas Negras, the Black Paintings, were given later. Goya painted them directly over earlier frescoes, and they were never meant for public view. After his death, the painter Salvador Martinez Cubels transferred the murals onto canvas at the request of the French banker Frédéric-Émile d'Erlanger, who planned to exhibit and possibly sell them at the 1878 World's Fair in Paris. Later, the works were donated to the Prado Museum. Interestingly, Goya himself gave no titles to these works. All existing names were added decades later when the paintings were moved to canvas about 50 years after his death. Goya's Saturn presents a haunting reinterpretation of the myth. Notably, he was inspired by Rubens's earlier version of the scene. Here, Saturn does not merely swallow his child, he tears the body apart, overcome by a primal, almost ecstatic frenzy. His figure barely fits within the frame. His twisted posture is unnerving. He grips the corpse with such force that the knuckles of his hands turn white. His eyes are wide, filled with madness. His disheveled hair emphasizes the terrifying loss of reason. This is not a god. It is something more ancient, something inhuman. One interpretation sees the painting as a depiction of violence and insanity, of the destructive force of power. Goya painted it during the violent upheavals of the Spanish Revolution of 1820-1823, and many interpret it as a reflection of war's horrors and the corruption of authority. Another reading connects it to Goya's personal life, which had descended into darkness. Not long before, his wife had suffered a miscarriage, and of their 8 children, only 1 survived into adulthood. There is no definitive interpretation of this painting, but the terror and despair it conveys make us pause and think, forcing us to confront the abyss within ourselves. Peter Paul Rubens also reinterpreted the ancient myth in his own way. In his painting, Saturn does not merely consume his child, but tears his flesh apart, driven by the fear of losing power. Rubens masterfully conveys both the divine madness and physical strength of the god. 3 stars above Saturn symbolize the planet Saturn, which Galileo Galilei had described only a few years earlier. The central star represents the planet itself, while the 2 smaller ones were what Galileo believed to be stars aligned on either side of it. In fact, they were the planet's rings, unseen through his weak telescope. Rubens's version feels less oppressive than Goya's, yet it shocks with the expression of the dying child. The boy's mouth is open in a silent scream, his hands stretched in agony, his eyes turned upward in the last moment of life. In Rubens's painting, Saturn appears as an aging god, less monstrous, yet filled with grim inevitability. Perhaps this impression comes from the staff he leans on, suggesting frailty, time, and decay. And what about you? What thoughts cross your mind when you look at these paintings? Which one frightens you more? Leave a like, share your impressions in the comments. I'd love to talk about it with you. Thank you all for watching.